What happens when one of music's most legendary icons goes head-to-head with daytime television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Cher sits down with Ellen DeGeneres in what was supposed to be a light-hearted promotional interview, only to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of The Ellen DeGeneres Show was meant to be a celebration of Cher's illustrious career and her latest projects. The iconic singer, actress, and activist had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her upcoming tour and recent philanthropic work. What started as typical celebrity banter quickly transformed into a powder keg of tension that would leave audiences stunned and social media buzzing for hours. The trouble began almost immediately after Cher took her seat on the familiar blue couch. Ellen, with her characteristic grin plastered across her face, launched into what seemed like harmless small talk about Cher's recent activities. But there was something different in the air that night, an undercurrent of hostility that keen observers could sense from the very first exchange. "So Cher, you've been very vocal lately about various social issues," Ellen began, her tone carrying an edge that regular viewers might have missed. "Some people are saying that celebrities should stick to entertaining and leave politics to politicians. What's your response to that?" Cher's expression immediately shifted. The veteran performer, known for her outspoken nature and fierce advocacy, straightened in her chair. "Well, Ellen, I think that's a pretty loaded question right off the bat. Are you suggesting that I don't have the right to speak about things I care about?" The studio audience, initially buzzing with excitement at seeing the legendary Cher, began to sense the tension. Ellen's smile never wavered, but her eyes seemed to narrow slightly. "Oh no, not at all. I'm just curious about your perspective. You know, some of your recent tweets have been quite passionate." "Passionate?" Cher repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Is that code for something, Ellen? Because I've been fighting for civil rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and social justice for decades. If standing up for what's right makes me passionate, then I'll take that as a compliment," Ellen chuckled, but it was a sound devoid of genuine warmth. Of course. I just think some people might say that constant political commentary can be exhausting for fans who just want to enjoy your music." The comment hit like a slap across the face. Cher's legendary composure began to crack as she processed what she was hearing. "Exhausting? Ellen, are you seriously sitting there telling me that fighting for human rights is exhausting? That speaking up against injustice is too much for people to handle?" "I'm not saying that at all," Ellen replied, her voice maintaining that artificially sweet tone that had become her trademark. "I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You know how it is. We have to consider all perspectives." But Cher wasn't buying it. The woman who had survived decades in the entertainment industry, who had faced down critics and skeptics at every turn, could smell insincerity from a mile away. "No, Ellen, you're not playing devil's advocate. You're being condescending. There's a difference." The studio had gone noticeably quiet. Even the production crew seemed to sense that something was going terribly wrong. Ellen's producers, watching from the wings, exchanged worried glances as they realized this interview was spiraling out of control. Ellen, perhaps realizing she had pushed too hard too fast, attempted to pivot. "Let's talk about your tour then. I know your fans are incredibly excited about the new dates you've announced." But Cher was having none of it. The damage had been done, and she wasn't about to let Ellen off the hook that easily. "Oh, so now we're changing the subject? After you just finished lecturing me about being too political? That's interesting timing, Ellen." "I wasn't lecturing anyone," Ellen protested, but her voice had lost some of its manufactured cheerfulness. "I was just trying to have a conversation." "A conversation?" Cher's voice was incredulous. "Ellen, a conversation involves two people talking with mutual respect. What you're doing is trying to diminish my voice and my right to speak out about things that matter to me. And frankly, I'm not surprised. The last comment hung in the air like a challenge. Ellen's smile faltered for just a moment, long enough for everyone in the studio to notice. What's that supposed to mean? Cher leaned forward, her eyes locked on Ellen's. It means that your track record speaks for itself. The way you've treated your staff, the stories that have come out about this show, it's all starting to make sense now. The reference to the workplace allegations that had plagued Ellen's show sent a visible shock through the host. Her carefully constructed facade began to crack as she realized that Cher wasn't just another celebrity who would play along with the show's scripted pleasantries. I think there might be some misunderstanding here, Ellen said, her voice tighter. Now, we've addressed those issues, and we've moved forward as a team. Have you, though? Cher pressed. Because sitting here right now, experiencing your attitude firsthand, I'm getting a pretty clear picture of what working with you must be like. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether they were witnessing an elaborate publicity stunt or a genuine meltdown. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the increasingly hostile exchange. Ellen's mask was slipping further with each passing second. Cher, I think you're being unfair. We invited you here to celebrate your career and your achievements. Did you? Cher shot back. Because it feels like you invited me here to try to put me in my place, to suggest that I should shut up and sing instead of speaking out about injustice. Well, I've got news for you, Ellen. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, and I'm not about to be lectured by someone who's built their career on fake kindness while treating people like garbage behind the scenes. The words cut deep, and Ellen's composure finally began to crack completely. Her smile disappeared entirely as she stared at Cher with barely concealed hostility. I think you're out of line. Am I? Cher stood up from the couch, her full height commanding the attention of everyone in the studio. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm finally seeing the real Ellen DeGeneres. And you know what? I don't like what I see. The confrontation had reached a boiling point, but this was only the beginning. What happened next would shock everyone in that studio and leave viewers at home questioning everything they thought they knew about daytime television's most famous host. Ellen's face had transformed completely. Gone was the bubbly persona that millions of viewers had come to expect, replaced by something cold and calculating. She stood up to match Cher's stance, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that the studio microphones barely picked up. You want to talk about the real me? Fine. Let's talk about the real you, Cher. Let's talk about your failed relationships, your plastic surgery, your desperate attempts to stay relevant in an industry that's moved on without you. The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the seasoned camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should continue filming. But they did, capturing every venomous word as Ellen's true nature emerged from behind her carefully crafted public image. Cher's eyes flashed with fury. Excuse me? Did you just try to shame me for my personal life and my appearance? This is rich, coming from someone who built their entire brand on being kind to others. Kind? Ellen let out a harsh laugh. You want to see kind? I've been kind enough not to mention how you've alienated half of Hollywood with your diva behavior. I've been kind enough not to bring up the lawsuits, the feuds, the bridges you've burned over the years. What lawsuits? Cher demanded, stepping closer to Ellen. What are you talking about? Are you making things up now? Ellen's eyes gleamed with malice. Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The costume designers you've thrown under the bus, the producers you've screamed at, the crew members you've treated like servants. Sound familiar? The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the studio. Ellen, who had been exposed for creating a toxic work environment, was now trying to project those same accusations onto her guest. But Cher wasn't about to let it slide. Are you seriously standing there accusing me of mistreating people? Cher's voice rose to a level that filled the entire studio. You? The person whose own employees described working here as traumatic? The person who created such a hostile work environment that your own show became a national scandal? Ellen's jaw clenched visibly. That's ancient history. We've moved past all of that. Have you? Cher shot back. Because right now, watching you attack me personally because I dared to challenge you, I'm seeing exactly what your employees were talking about. This is what you do, isn't it? When someone doesn't bow down to you, when someone doesn't play, along with your fake nice act, you turn nasty. The audience was completely silent now, watching in horror as their beloved daytime host revealed a side of herself that many had only heard whispered about in industry circles. Some audience members were visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats or covering their mouths in shock. Ellen took another step toward Cher, her voice growing more aggressive. You think you're so righteous, don't you? You think you're some kind of icon who can come on my show and lecture me about how to behave? Let me tell you something, Cher. You're a has-been trying to stay relevant by stirring up controversy. A has-been? Cher's voice was incredulous. Ellen, I've sold over 100 million records worldwide. I've won an Oscar, a Grammy, an Emmy, and a Tony. I've been performing for over 50 years, and I'm still selling out arenas while you're here desperately trying to save a career that's already over. The words hit their mark. Ellen's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. My career is far from over. I have millions of loyal viewers who tune in every day to see me. Do you? Cher challenged. Because your ratings have been tanking. For years. People are finally seeing through your act, Ellen. They're realizing that the kindness was all fake, that behind the dancing and the games and the fake smiles, you're just another Hollywood bully who's drunk on power. Ellen's hands were visibly shaking now. Whether from rage or humiliation, no one could tell. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about my life or my show or my relationship with my audience. I know enough, Cher replied coldly. I know that you built your career on telling people to be kind to one another while treating your own staff like garbage. I know that you've surrounded yourself with yes men who are too afraid to tell you the truth. And I know that right now, in front of all these people and all those cameras, you're showing everyone exactly who you really are. The confrontation had escalated beyond anything anyone in that studio had ever witnessed. Ellen's producers were frantically gesturing from the wings, trying to signal for a commercial break, but Ellen was too far gone to notice or care. You want to know who I really am? Ellen's voice was practically a snarl now. I'm someone who's worked incredibly hard to build something meaningful. I'm someone who's given a platform to thousands of people, who's donated millions to charity, who's made people laugh when they needed it most. And you're also someone who's created a culture of fear and intimidation behind the scenes, Sherry countered. Someone who's been exposed for psychological torture of employees. Someone who's more concerned with their public image than with actually being a decent human being. Ellen's composure snapped completely. Get out! Just get out of my studio right now! Your studio? Cher laughed bitterly. Ellen, this isn't your studio. This is Warner Brothers' studio. You're just an employee here, just like everyone else you've been mistreating for years. The observation struck at the heart of Ellen's insecurity. Her need to feel powerful and in control. I said get out! Security! But Cher wasn't intimidated. Oh, you're calling security on me now? For what? For telling the truth? For refusing to play along with your charade? The studio audience was in complete shock. Many were recording on their phones, despite rules against it, knowing they were witnessing television history in the making. The confrontation had become something unprecedented, a complete breakdown of the artificial construct that daytime television represented. Ellen turned to her audience, her voice desperate and pleading. I'm sorry you all have to see this. This is not what we planned for today's show. But Cher wasn't done. No, Ellen, this is exactly what needed to happen. These people needed to see who you really are when the cameras aren't rolling and you're not performing your little kindness act. The tension in the room had reached a breaking point. Ellen's face was a mask of barely controlled rage, while Cher stood her ground with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. What happened next would cement this moment as one of the most shocking confrontations in television history. Ellen suddenly lunged forward, pointing her finger directly at Cher's face. "You think you can come into my house and disrespect me like this? You think you can destroy everything I've built?" Cher didn't flinch. Instead, she grabbed Ellen's pointing finger and gently but firmly pushed her hand away. "Don't you dare put your hands near me, Ellen. And this isn't your house. This is a workplace where you've terrorized people for years." The physical contact sent shockwaves through the studio. Several audience members gasped audibly while others pulled out their phones to capture what they knew would be viral footage within hours. The security guards that Ellen had called for were now actually approaching, but they seemed confused about who they were supposed to be protecting. "I want her arrested for assault," Ellen screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "She touched me. Everyone saw it." Cher looked at Ellen with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Assault? I moved your finger away from my face. Ellen, you're having a complete breakdown on national television, and it's painful to watch." The studio audience began murmuring among themselves. Some were standing up, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. Others remained seated, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. The camera operators continued filming, knowing they were capturing television gold. Ellen spun around to face her audience, her arms spread wide in a gesture of desperate appeal. "These are the people who really know me. These are my fans who come here every day because they love what we do together." But the response wasn't what Ellen expected. Instead of supportive cheers, there was an uncomfortable silence. A few scattered claps echoed through the studio, but they sounded hollow and forced. One audience member near the front actually shook her head visibly, her face showing clear disappointment. Cher seized the moment. "Look around, Ellen. Look at their faces. These people came here expecting to meet the Ellen they see on TV. The kind, funny, generous Ellen. Instead, they're seeing who you really are, and they're horrified." "Shut up!" Ellen shrieked, completely abandoning any pretense of composure. "You don't get to speak for my audience. You don't get to come here and poison them against me." "I'm not poisoning anyone," Cher replied calmly. "I'm just giving them permission to trust their own eyes and ears. They can see what's happening here, Ellen. They can see how you react when someone doesn't worship at your altar." Ellen's breathing was becoming erratic. Sweat was visible on her forehead despite the studio's air conditioning. Her carefully styled hair was beginning to come undone, and her makeup was starting to smudge. The transformation from polished television host to unhinged antagonist was complete. "You're jealous," Ellen spat, grasping for any weapon she could find. "You're jealous because I have something you never had, a real connection with people. You're just a performer, but I'm a friend to millions of Americans." Cher shook her head sadly. "Ellen, if this is how you treat your friends, then I feel sorry for everyone in your life. A real friend doesn't manipulate people. A real friend doesn't create fear and anxiety. A real friend doesn't build their happiness on other people's misery." The words hit Ellen like physical blows. She staggered backward slightly, her face contorting with a mixture of rage and something that looked almost like recognition, as if she was seeing herself clearly for the first time in years. "I help people," Ellen whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "I give them gifts. I make them laugh. I dance with them." "No, Ellen," Cher said firmly. "You perform for people. There's a difference. Real kindness doesn't require an audience. Real generosity doesn't come with cameras and publicity. What you do is theater, and apparently the theater is closing." Ellen's legs seemed to give out slightly, and she sank back into her chair. For a moment she looked small and defeated, like a child who had been caught in a lie. But then the rage returned, fiercer than before. "Get out of here!" Ellen screamed, jumping back to her feet. "Get out right now! This interview is over!" Cher nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for exactly this moment. "You're right, Ellen. This interview is over. And frankly, so are you." She turned to face the studio audience directly, her voice carrying the authority of decades in show business. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize that you had to witness this. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you got to see what happens when someone's true character is revealed under pressure. I hope you'll remember this moment, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest." Several audience members began applauding, not the forced, orchestrated applause that usually filled the studio, but genuine, spontaneous clapping. It started with just a few people but quickly spread throughout the audience. They were applauding Cher, not Ellen. Ellen watched in horror as her own audience turned against her. "Stop it! Stop clapping for her! This is my show!" But the applause continued, growing louder. Some audience members were even standing up, giving Cher a genuine ovation. The irony was devastating. In Ellen's own studio, in front of her own cameras, her own audience was rejecting her in favor of her guest. Cher raised her hand to quiet the applause. "Thank you, but that's not necessary. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came here to promote my tour and talk about my work. What happened here today happened because one person couldn't handle being challenged." She gathered her purse and began walking toward the exit. But before she left, she turned back one final time. "Ellen, I genuinely hope you get the help you need. The person I saw today isn't someone who should be on television, interacting with the public. You're angry, you're cruel, and you're out of control. That's not entertainment. That's a cry for help." Ellen was left standing alone on her own stage, in front of her own audience, completely exposed and utterly defeated. The cameras continued rolling as she struggled to find words, any words, that might salvage the situation. We'll be right back after these messages," she finally managed to stammer, but her voice was barely audible. Cher walked out of the studio with her head held high, leaving behind one of the most devastating takedowns in television history. As the studio doors closed behind her, the audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. The confrontation was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come. In less than an hour, Ellen DeGeneres had gone from beloved daytime host to exposed television villain, all because she couldn't handle one guest who refused to play along with her act. Cher had walked into that studio as a promotional guest and walked out as a truth-teller who had pulled back the curtain on one of Hollywood's biggest frauds. The cameras finally stopped rolling, but the damage was irreversible. What was supposed to be a simple celebrity interview had become a masterclass in how quickly a carefully constructed public persona can crumble when faced with someone who refuses to be intimidated. Ellen's reign as America's sweetheart was officially over, ended not by scandal or controversy, but by her own inability to maintain her facade when truly challenged. As Cher's car pulled away from the studio lot, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the truth was ugly, but it was always necessary. And today, the truth had finally won.